Have a listen to this. Have a listen to this.
Now, that kind of talk this week dragged Australia's share market to a two-year low. There are, of course, complex reasons for that.
He was the big spender. Right. The big spender.
Doing the grocery shopping could take a huge chunk out of the family budget.
And that's finance.
Hello and welcome to Comedian versus Economist. We demystify the world of money and help you get a handle on the bigger picture. My name's Adam and we're joined as always by my little older brother and real-life economist, Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Yeah, g'day, Adam. How are you?
Pretty good, thank you. How's yourself?
Yeah, doing well.
That's good. Hey, big show coming up this week. Today we're going to be asking you, Thomas, have the training wheels fallen off the commodity supercycle already? We've got some sweet data coming at you in the form of wages and jobs data. And why is Toyota slashing its car production by 40%? But first, Thomas, it's reporting season here in Australia. And if you haven't heard already, Equity Mates guys are covering off a lot of the earnings calls this week, talking to CEOs. So there's lots going on. Thomas, I was wondering, what's caught your eye so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general flavour is everyone's doing well, more or less in line with expectations, but expectations were strong, so companies are doing well, profits are pretty good. Yeah, and the outlooks are pretty decent. The one that caught I was listening to the Equity Mates guys today, and they did a bit of a wrap, and I listened to Goodman Group.
I've never heard of them. No,
I know. They're a little Aussie company doing good on the global stage, punching above their weight. Yeah, no, they rent sheds and industrial spaces, big boxes and automated sheds.
So they're in hardware.
Yes.
They're like a
Bunnings.
Goodman's warehouse.
The Goodman guys, I think, is the. No, they rent like warehouse spaces. And so one of their biggest customers is Amazon. Amazon accounts for 7% of their revenue. And basically it's sort of like halfway houses for retail delivery is one of their plays. So they have these sort of warehouse spaces in industrial areas. That's their story. But they're an Aussie company. They started here, but now they're all over the world. I think they're in 7 different countries now.
Right, so Amazon have their big online stores, the marketplaces, and then the Goodman Group lease their sheds to Amazon, and Amazon store all their stuff there.
Yeah, I think that's right. But one of the things they're talking about is automated sheds. So it's not just a big box where people come and put their stuff, but it's sort of a distribution center that automates some of that process.
So like drones and stuff flying around.
Yeah.
Like the future.
In the future, yes. I don't know if that's right just there yet, but that's sort of where they're going. And that's one of the things they're noting is they're seeing real strong demand for infill sites. So sites already close to major population centres. So not on the outskirts of the city, but in close to where people are to facilitate that delivery.
That could be interesting because with COVID, there was there still is. There's a big shift to working from home. And so there's a lot of, at least office space. I don't know if it's suitable for running an Amazon warehouse out of, but I imagine there's a lot of space maybe now that's becoming freed up. So potentially they could be taking over some of those more centralized locations to set up warehouses.
Yeah, I think that could be right. I mean, I don't know about offices, but definitely, they're definitely saying that Greg Goodman was saying 60% of the group's development, so they actually build these things, are now multi-story.
If you are working in an office and there's a robot next to you packing goods into boxes, that's a sure sign that maybe Goodman Group has already moved in into your building. So it's just things to look out for, little tips we like to give you here on Comedian versus Economist.
Yeah.
How to tell if your building's slowly becoming a warehouse factory for Amazon. Because it'll happen slowly. I heard Amazon is starting bloody department stores. They're about to launch department stores in the US.
Right. Well, clever, isn't it? Just destroy big box shopping with online delivery and then recreate on big box shopping.
Yeah.
Genius.
It's clever. Right. So that's obviously going well for Goodman Group. Their share price is good.
Earnings are up 10%, which was a little bit disappointing. Analysts were expecting 14% So the share price dropped a little bit on that news, but it's bounced back since, so kind of still flat. But yeah, still strong. Outlooks look strong. I mean, what's interesting about Goodman for me is it's another way to play online, the move to online. Like we saw this, so you and I got into the iBuy ETF, which is looking at digital retailers. Yeah, got in ahead of the curve on that one.
The curve had well and truly started by the time we got in.
But that was a pretty good play through 2020. Yeah. And JB Hi-Fi had their reports. Their online sales were up 78% to 1.1 billion.
Yeah, and Kogan went gangbusters during the pandemic. They had some issues more recently, but yeah, they went through.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying maybe this is the play. Like maybe some of those companies potentially are overvalued, or they're at least sort of right on their value. Maybe looking towards the sort of next layer down.
But yeah, I think it's, I don't know that it's a replacement of those kind of companies. Like you got to look at those metrics themselves. But I think it's an interesting way to think about this. So, so JB Hi-Fi as an example, their online sales up almost 80%, but it's still only 12% of total sales. So I say like 12% penetration. So Goodman's is saying, well, like the whole economy will go to 40% penetration. So 40% online retail. Right. Versus in-store retail. And, that's a lot of people are expecting that over the next 10 years. Goodman expects that in the next 5 to 6.
Yeah, right.
So you're potentially talking about a huge ramp up in online retail, which needs delivery centers. And
there's shipping constraints around the world at the moment. It has been since another impact of COVID was, supply chain issues. So maybe this is the play as well. Like these big warehouses that can stockpile tons of goods for Amazon, have it ready to go in or near the location where people are buying. Kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. The best way to invest in online retail is to buy bricks and mortar. Right. Well, moving on from the Goodman Group. And Thomas, I thought I just wanted to check in and see how we were going with the supercycle. We talked about this.
The commodity supercycle.
Dr. Doom, if you remember from season 2, episode 15 of Comedian versus Economist, Dr. Doom was out saying buy commodities. Season 2, episode 11, Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan were talking up a new commodity supercycle this was going to see us through generations. So I thought it's a good time that we just check in on the supercycle, see how we're tracking.
Not so great actually. Iron ore prices are down 45% over the last 3 weeks. Bit of a road bump in the supercycle.
A folding cycle.
Yeah, iron ore prices are tanked. Yeah, Morgan Stanley saying it's the fastest price correction on record. That's got people rattled. So yeah, it's tanked from about over $220, towards the end of July, I think it was, and now it's down to like $137 or something a ton, US dollars a ton for iron ore.
Wow.
So yeah, very rapid crash.
What happened? The obvious question. What happened?
Well, yeah, not a lot of answers on that question.
We were gearing up for 20 years. I was all in. Well, it was like we actually talked a whole episode about what supercycles are, and if I've learned anything, it's that supercycles last throughout cycles. There are many cycles end to end that last for 20, 30 years. It's like that was 4 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time, I was saying that like I felt like I agreed with the idea that the supercycle was overplaying. Yeah, no, I called it. I definitely called it.
Oh, 2020 hindsight comes out again.
No, it was like they seemed to be conflating a reflation trade, so like a rebound coming out of the COVID lockdown with the supercycle. And there's a lot of talk about the infrastructure spending that was going to come. Like there was a lot of infrastructure spending that came out of 2020 as governments tried to, restart their economies. And that created a lot of commodity demand. But it was a crisis response. And so it wasn't necessarily going to be ongoing. And it wasn't clear that it was going to be ongoing because it wasn't clear where the long run demand was going to come from. Yeah, and as it happens, that the economies are starting to wind back that stimulus. China is the big story here, and they've announced that they're trying to wind back steel production to 2020 levels. And so steel production's already increased 12% this year. So that means that over the next 6 months, they need to wind steel production back by 12% to hit 2020 levels.
Right.
And because of the way the Chinese economy is structured, they're probably going to do that because the government's got a very strong say in how much steel gets produced. So that sort of seems to shift the tone. That announcement seems like people are realizing, this sort of endless demand for iron ore and steel out of China isn't actually there. The construction sector is having troubles now. Evergrande, a big company in China, is really struggling. And that accounts for something like 60% of seaborne iron ore trade, the Chinese construction sector. So the narrative has really shifted on iron ore and commodity demand, and that seems to be whacking the commodity prices.
It feels a lot like a messy breakup, this China situation.
Yeah.
First they didn't want our wine, We're like, fancy a drink later, China? They're like, nah, I just don't feel like drinking right now. Oh, sure. Okay, well, we'll see you tomorrow for the working bit. Yeah, we'll put on those fences. We'll bring some steel. Oh, yeah, I got a thing on tomorrow. Maybe. This is how every breakup's ever gone, where we just keep kind of, it's one thing after another.
We're a bit clingy, I think.
We are.
I think it's time to move on.
Commodities, is more than just iron ore. Is it a commodities story, or is it just an iron ore story at the moment?
I think it is. Copper's copped a whacking as well. I don't know about the full gamut of commodities, but they're the big ones for us. Definitely iron ore. Like the BHP, 80% of their, now that they're going to offload their oil assets, 80% of their revenue comes through iron ore. BHP is really an iron ore company.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it has a big impact on that. I mean, the other thing is that it has a big impact on the federal budget. So iron ore prices feed directly through into GDP, but also into federal government tax receipts. And there's some analysis I saw that's saying for every US $10 a ton decrease in the iron ore price, it knocks 6.5 billion off GDP and 1.3 billion off tax revenue.
Yeah, wow.
So it has a big impact. We're a very commodity exposed economy.
I saw that the Australian dollar is down as well. So what's that got to do with iron ore?
Well, I guess because you just buy iron ore in Aussie dollars. You buy Aussie iron ore in Aussie dollars. It gets priced on the global market in US dollars, but if you're an Aussie company selling Aussie iron ore, you're charging it in Aussie dollars. So if you're buying less Aussie iron ore, the price goes down. You need less Aussie dollars to buy it. So demand for Aussie dollars goes down, and that takes the price down. Yeah, it's down to a 10-month low now, sort of pushing towards that 70% threshold. Significant mark.
Is it though? I read that. I did see that as well. The 70 cent, not 70%. 70 cent was like some precipice we were going to fall off if we hit it. What? Why is 70 cents important?
No, it's not really. It's just a round number.
This has got economists written all over it. It doesn't mean anything. It's a round number, and we like round numbers.
Oh, it's just a mark, just a sort of a
like making 100 in cricket or something, like scoring a ton.
Yeah,
it doesn't actually mean anything to anyone. It's just 100 of something, but it's fun because it's 100, and you've got 3 numbers next to your name now instead of 2.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. I'm glad we got that cleared up. All right. Before we get on to the rest of the show, why don't we take a short break, grab a word from our sponsor, and be back with more Comedian vs. Economist after this. Welcome back here on Comedian vs. Economist. You can always send us an email, cve@equitymates.com, or over on the website, equitymates.com/CVE, or why not check out our Facebook and Instagram pages. Are they pages anymore? I don't know what they are. Profiles, sites, somethings, handles. Anyway, have a look. I'm sure you know how these things work. CVE Podcast is where you'll find us. Thomas, it's my favourite time of the week. We've got some data to look at. What are we looking at?
Unemployment rate. So they had the jobs release last week. Unemployment rate dropped, shocked a lot of people, dropped from 4.9% down to 4.6%. the lowest level since 2008.
That's good, right? Unemployment low equals good.
Yeah, generally. So it dropped even though there was pretty much no jobs growth, and full-time jobs actually fell by 4,200 jobs. So full-time jobs went down. And what we saw was there was a fall in the participation rate. So people sort of stepped out of the jobs market.
Right.
And I think it's largely a New South Wales story. So in New South Wales, employment was down a pretty massive 36,000 in the month. That's a big number.
36,000, yeah, right.
Yeah, and total hours worked was down by 7%. So yeah, big drop in activity in New South Wales. But the number of unemployed people was also down 27,000.
Does that cater for like people that might get government support or government assistance as a result of being stood down, or I know with JobKeeper in 2020, you were still considered employed. I think when even though you might not be working, you were still getting money. You get JobKeeper money, and so you were still considered working. Is that still the case, or do we have different sort of figures now that we're working from?
That definition still applies. You need to be counted as unemployed. You need to have been actively looking for work in the survey period and have been ready and available to work in the survey period.
But what if you had a job and you got stood down? You work at a cafe and the cafe's closed, and so you wouldn't be looking for work. Like, you've got a job and maybe you're getting some sort of a government support payment. Where does that fit into the jobs data? Yeah,
you're probably not. Like if you're not working and you're not, so you don't have a job, so you're not employed, and you're not unemployed because you're not actively looking for work and ready to start work. So then you're out of the labour force. Even though you're getting like a government support because you'd lost your job. Yeah. You need to be actively looking for work. That's the key criteria. Right. So that seems to be what's going on, is that, there's a number of unemployed people. People have lost jobs. Unemployed people stop looking for work, probably because lockdown is hard to look for work in lockdown, and it's, in the middle of a lockdown, so who's hiring? Yeah. Yeah, so it's a big drop in the number of unemployed people as well. So then, huge drop in the participation rate. So the proportion of the population that's in the job market either is employed or unemployed relative to the total population. There's sort of a big fall in that. And that's what drove down the unemployment rate, was that fall in the participation rate. Right. So my earlier comment of unemployment low equals good is not necessarily true. No, that's right. In this case, that's not true. That's not true. I mean, it's interesting because, we've been focused on the mid-4s for a long time, since the start of the year. So Phil Lowe saying he wants mid-4% unemployment rate before he's going to start thinking about raising interest rates. Josh Frydenberg saying he wants mid-4s before he starts looking at budget repair and winding government spending back. So it's been a sort of this critical mark, mid-4s, sort of a vague term. Yeah, right. But it's, 4.6 is, it's got to be pretty close to mid-4s. You would think. I'm no economist, Thomas, but 4.6 sounds pretty mid-4s to me. Yeah. 4.7, get out of here, you're crazy. Yeah. What are you even talking about? 4.6, we are mid-4s. We only get one decimal point though, so it's a bit hard to know. It could be 4.64. So it's like... True. But no one's going to be changing policy on the back of this number, because it's all about the participation rate. And we should expect the unemployment rate to tick up above 5, you would think, next month. Depending on how lockdown goes, I guess. But when those unemployed people come back into the job market. So do we have we've got that unemployment rate number. Do we have a number that kind of better reflects the health of the workforce? Do you know what I mean? I don't mean the sort of physical health in relation to COVID. I mean, like, how healthy are we in terms of our, people who want to work or in work? Because if unemployment being low isn't necessarily a good thing, then how do we tell if we're tracking well or not? Do you know what I mean? Every measure has its limitations, but probably the best in terms of tracking how we're going month to month is in hours worked. Right. So hours worked fell 0.2% this month. So that sort of tells us that the economic activity and the number of people with jobs and earning money, no matter how you sort of cut that up, when you look at the total hours worked, that's down. So that says the jobs market weakened. It's a worse outcome because People work less and they earn less, so it's a worse outcome for people. So hours work kind of gives you that sort of ability to cut through.
Okay. I'll keep an eye on that.
The other interesting thing we got wages data that disappointed as well. We were expecting 0.6, we got 0.44 in the June quarter. Yeah, we were all pretty bummed out here actually.
I mean, I was hoping for mid-zeros, and we've...
But yeah, we're moving in the right direction. Yeah, so annually we're growing at 1.71%. That's picked up from 1.4, I think, in the previous quarter. So things are improving. We're going in the right direction. Private wages are picking up strongly. They're at 1.9. So that's good. But you think about inflation running at 3.7. That means that real wages fell through the year. Effectively. So even though wages are starting to pick up, they're still weak, like in the ones, in the mid to high ones. That's weak.
Yeah, right.
And it's not growing stronger than inflation, which means that real purchasing power is falling. So and will probably get worse in the September quarter. So that only has a really limited capture of the New South Wales lockdown.
Yeah, right.
So the overall story is that the jobs market has clearly turned. It's weakening. The New South Wales lockdown is having its impact, but we're starting from a relatively strong-ish position. But yeah, it's going to be a bit of a rocky rest of the year probably. I
don't get it though. So if unemployment's low, and it wasn't long ago, it was like 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how, we're talking about high demand jobs and shipping people in to fill these roles, and people were starting to talk about how much money do you want? You can name your own salary. Why are we not seeing wages increase? Why aren't wages going up?
They are improving. Like, it's stronger than we've seen in recent times. 1.9 in the private sector. That's significantly better than we've seen in recent years. So it's going in the right direction. It is definitely tightening. But these things take time to sort of play out. And then, and I think it's probably patchy. It probably depends on the different sectors. There's some sectors where the labour market is really tight and others where it's not so tight. Wages also take a long time to respond because it's sort of, there's only a small percentage of the population that changes jobs in any point in time. So if the current market rate improves, it's only that share of the workforce that actually takes up that higher paying work. A lot of people are on fixed contracts or whatever, so there's a bit of stickiness in the wage prices.
I'll cancel the meeting I had with my boss for tomorrow. Then discuss my salary. Just cancel.
I just want to catch up. Actually.
Just catch up, yeah. Yes. What's going on? All right. Finally, before we go, there's been a microchip shortage worldwide. I don't know. Most people would be aware of that, I would think. Huge microchip shortage since the pandemic kind of kicked off. But it's starting to have some massive impacts now. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, the key thing this week is that Toyota has announced that they're cutting production by 40% in September. 40? 40? Yeah. They just don't, and because they just don't have the chips to build the cars. There's a research firm, IHS Markit, saying that the shortage of semiconductors worldwide will cut auto production by up to 7.1 million vehicles this year. So that's about 10% of the normal annual production of cars. So big hit because there just isn't the microchips available.
I read something. There's 1,500 chips in your average car.
Yeah.
1,500.
It's amazing, isn't it? Ford also said they're going to put one of their F-150 truck plants in Kansas City on stand down because they just don't have the parts as well.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting story the way this played out. So like the first thing that happened when COVID launched is that car makers got wrong-footed. So they expected the global economy to tank, and because cars are sort of like a discretionary item, it's the kind of thing. It's one of the first things that people cut back on when things get tough. They don't cut back on food. They cut back on a new car purchase. And so they cancelled a whole bunch of orders because they thought, we're going to have to wind back production. And so they cancelled a whole bunch of orders. But then what happened is that the economy was fine and actually going great guns, and consumers were flush and ready to spend on cars. And so demand bounced back. But then the car makers went back to the market and tried to put in orders for chips. But what had happened in that time is that consumer electronics sales had boomed as well. They were up 60%. Notebooks were up 80%. Tablets are up 50%. So consumer electronics sales were booming.
And I think that a lot of that was because of the work from home movement, right? Like, so lockdown happened and globally the pandemic took hold and everyone started moving to work from home. I remember the employer I was working for at the time, first thing we did was like, right, we need to go out and buy like 100 laptops for staff who don't have the capability to work from home. And then, like it happened really quickly. So car makers are like, man, no one wants cars for a while. We'll park that. Yeah, and meanwhile, as you say, notebooks and tablets and consumer electronics went gangbusters.
Yeah.
Right, so the car manufacturers have got no chips.
Yeah, and so when they came back to the market, they had, and the other thing is that the car industry only makes up 10% of microchip demand. So they don't have a lot of power in the market. So they ended up behind the queues, behind Apple, behind Samsung, because they just didn't have enough sway. Yeah, so you had that's going on. And then at the same time as that, so there's that sort of weird demand story. So chip manufacturers before COVID were already running at pretty close to 100% capacity. There wasn't a lot of slack in the production ability. There wasn't ability to ramp up production. And then you have these sort of COVID stories. So like a lot of the chip manufacturing happens in Asia and Malaysia particularly. But then these countries got into lockdowns with COVID outbreaks, so their capacity was reduced. So you had this sort of big uptick in demand meeting a reduced capacity to supply, and that's economics 101. That's going to lead to higher prices, and chip prices actually tripled.
The perfect storm. I think some of these companies got ahead of the game, didn't they? And they kind of stockpiled a lot of chips early on as well, which probably, like once people noticed this trend was happening, I think people started like panic buying chips, not like I did during lockdown, but like semiconductor chips.
Yeah, I think that is true. And the interesting thing about Toyota is that they dodged. This industry has been plaguing the car industry. This issue has been plaguing the car industry for a while, but Toyota had been able to avoid it to a degree because after Fukushima in 2011, they had a policy of stockpiling chips. Because when Fukushima hit, their supply chains were majorly disrupted and it really messed with them. So they said, "Well, let's have a stockpile of chips ready to go." So they're the sort of the last car maker to come in to meet this problem, but they've met it now, and they're all the car industry's in trouble. Right.
So when are we likely to see this turn around? I mean, it sounds like there's a fair bit of downside to play out.
I think so. I mean, and particularly because it's still largely dependent on COVID and what happens with COVID in Asia, in these production centers, and that's anybody's guess. So, yeah, who knows how long it takes? So, like the IHS market I mentioned before, I think they're looking for early to mid 2022. Yeah, but
why is that funny?
Well, no, it's just this mid number again.
Oh, right.
Couldn't give us a specific month. But,
no, right. No, fair enough.
Yeah, but the longer it drags on, then we might see there's talk that some car manufacturers are sort of like put some models on hold and are focusing just on their high margin cars because that's where the money is, and just going, okay, we're going to cut the Camry loose and just focus on whatever. But some manufacturers are putting analog speedometers back into cars, so getting rid of the digital ones and putting analog speedos in.
Right. I've got. What does that say? I've got an analog speedo in my car. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah. So we might
back to wind up windows and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
My kids will be devastated. But I'll be happy.
Yeah. So I know we might see more vintage cars coming onto market.
Yeah. Wow. I did my own research in this area. It's a bit of a crisis. It's even affected the sex toy industry. There's a sex toy maker called Crave Innovations out of San Francisco, and they've said that they've had to cease production as well, which just talk about your perfect storm. Like these guys make self-pleasure devices, and they're saying that they have microchips and things that exist in these devices and they can't get them. So they've had to halt production. And I tell you what, there's nothing worse than being in lockdown by yourself without your self-pleasure device. And you don't want to skimp on dodgy chips, because the last thing you need, of all the appliances you've got, the last one you want catching fire midway through a session is one of those. So, look, thankfully, I did also read Joe Biden has pledged $50 billion to bolster the country's chip-making abilities, because he's seen the writing on the wall.
Smart.
He's worried. I think it was the San Francisco toy-making company that might have tipped him over the line.
We need to go long in an analog sex toy manufacturer.
Go long. Good to see we've got the subject of the email already sorted out. On that ridiculously childish note, we might end it there for this week. Yeah, that's it. We'll end it there. Thanks very much for tuning in. As always, had a bit of fun on this show, I think you'll find. Really appreciate you listening and appreciate your support. Hope you're doing well in lockdown. If you are, stay strong. And we will talk to you again next week. We'll see you then.
Comedian vs. Economist is a product of Equity Mates Media. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal, or tax advice. The hosts of Comedian vs. Economist are not financial professionals and are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the Equity Mates website, where you can find ASIC resources and find a registered financial professional near you. In the spirit of reconciliation, Equity Mates Media and the hosts of Comedian vs. Economist acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.